Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend, I'm with eLearning Brothers. Today's session is going to be about storyboarding and how to visualize your course using storyboarding. This session will be recorded. We'll get a copy of it emailed out to everybody who has registered for this session, and we will also be posting a recap of this on our blog at a later time. We'll be using the questions panel to respond and address some of your questions and thoughts. We're also going to be asking for your feedback from time to time, so please do use that questions panel to communicate with us. It looks like a couple of you have already found that, and we're excited that you guys are all here. All right, so let's dive right in to talk to us about storyboarding. We have our very own Dr. David Christiansen, our senior instructional designer, with us today. Thank you, Doctor, for your time, and I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I know you have busy schedules, and we really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us for a little while. My name is Dave Christiansen, and the topic for this particular webinar is going to be catching the vision of your clients and then also sharing your vision with the clients. That seems to be one of the biggest tricks is, as far as time and resources, is when we're not on the same page with our clients or with our subject matter experts. And so this particular topic is how you can share your vision of your course and then also catch the vision from those that you work with. And as usual, for those of you that are new, while we wait for a few people to join, I always start with my Idaho joke. I am originally from a small town in southeastern Idaho, and so I tell an Idaho joke just to kind of break the ice. So here goes. How did the Idahoan break his leg while raking leaves?
How did he do it?
He fell out of the tree. Just a little bit of the bad humor there. My students, they always roll their eyes, but they do laugh because they know their grades depend upon their responses to my Idaho jokes. But I always just start off with a little Idaho joke just to break the ice. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to share this. I ran across this a few years ago, and I really like it from an instructional design standpoint. Project managers also appreciate it. You may not be able to read all of these, but I'm going to go through them very quickly. This is kind of one of the challenges that we have as instructional designers and whenever we design training. First is how the customer explained it. If you look at the top left image, then you see how the project leader understood it. Then you see how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, how the business consultant sold it, how the project was documented, what operations were installed for it, how the customer was billed for it, how it was supported, and then finally, what the customer really needed, which is just the tire. That's all they really needed. And then you see the different iterations of this particular project, the particular training. And this really is, I like it. It's humorous, but it's also really, really close to what goes on. Sometimes if we can't catch the vision of what the clients want and we can't share our vision, we end up going through these different iterations and we miss the mark. We don't give the client what they really wanted or what they really needed. So for the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to go through some things that we've learned here at eLearning Brothers about how we can share our vision with clients and how we can capture their vision so that we're not spending too much time doing reiteration upon reiteration. We're giving them a finished product that they really didn't want or need. And so I've always liked this. I found this many, many years ago, and I've always liked this because it really does kind of capitulate and summarize what it's like for us in the instructional design field. So we're going to be talking about 4 different topics. First of all is why do we storyboard, which is a really good question. Some people, they wonder, well, why do we storyboard first? Why don't we just create the finished product? Then number 2, you need to catch the vision first. Number 3, you need to share your vision. And then number 4, simplify, simplify, simplify when we're actually creating our storyboard. So question, why would we want to storyboard first? So I'm going to open that up to you in the audience. Just a quick 1-sentence answer, just to get your thoughts. Why would you want to storyboard first? I'll give you a minute or 2 to type in some quick responses. Why not just go straight to development? Why not just develop the thing first? Why do we want to storyboard first?
All right, so some of these are coming in to keep me and the client focused, to lay out a plan,
Yes.
To be faster and easier when you need to make changes. You got to know where you're going to know if you got there. That's good.
That's
How do you
good.
know if you're going to accomplish a goal if you don't set something out? So you don't forget the big picture.
Yes.
So we have a mutual understanding with the client with what success looks like. A benchmark to refer to later. Did we develop the project we all said that we wanted once upon a time? And when whatever you might have in your head, once you put it down on paper, it might look quite a bit different.
Yeah, those are great. Those are absolutely great. Yeah, it actually saves time, resources, and money, because those are basically the three components that we have to account for: is our time, our resources, and the money. And it's kind of like a funnel. We start at 30,000 feet with our storyboard. Some people will even do what's called a DSD, a design specifications document. I like the idea of a DSD myself because it just gives them that high vision up front, and it does actually save time. Some people don't like doing a DSD. I'm okay with a DSD. Anything that helps us to start off at a very high level. If you look at the funnel, we go with general content, general concepts, general ideas. They can see basically what those are and give us feedback. Then we start to make them more specific. We start making decisions. We start seeking agreement. We especially need to overcome client indecision. A lot of times our clients really don't know what they want. They know maybe what they don't like and what they do like, but a storyboard and a DSD, if you want to go that route, those really help us in order to hone in our concepts and our ideas and taper them down until we finally get the finalized content specifics nailed down, which would be done in development. So that's one of the reasons, the main reasons why I really like storyboarding, is because it helps us to go from that high view of 30,000 feet and be able to make changes before we get down to ground level. So that's one of the reasons why. And I really liked your responses too. Those were all really good responses too. I don't think we have any questions yet because that's just a basic introduction, so I'll just go forward. You need to catch the vision first. And to do this, I still like the ADDIE model. A lot of people think it's kind of outdated. It's been around since the 1960s. It was actually started by the U.S. Department of Defense and just kind of evolved into the ADDIE model. And I still think it's a very good model to use. One of the things that I think that we fail to do as instructional designers is we don't use the A in the ADDIE model as effectively as we could. We kind of think, well, we got some basic information from the client, let's go ahead and start designing. Or in some cases, we jump right into development without really analyzing what the client's needs are. And here's an example of this. Let me give you a situation. You are tasked to create a 15-minute training on sexual harassment for a bank. What questions would you want to ask during the analysis stage? Now, let's assume that you're going to have a kickoff meeting, which I would recommend. Here at eLearning Brothers, we try to begin all of our projects with a kickoff meeting. It's usually about an hour, and part of that is for me as the instructional designer to ask them questions. And this is the analysis stage. And some people, they do it a little bit more in detail, some maybe a little bit less. But let's just assume that you're going to have a kickoff meeting. I'm going to go ahead and open this up to you. You can just type one question. You don't need to type many, but what would be one question that you would want to ask your subject matter experts or your key stakeholders if you were to do a 15-minute training on sexual harassment for a bank? I'll go ahead and open it up to you. Go ahead and give a few responses of a question that you'd want to ask. And then I'll share mine.
All right, a couple questions coming in here. What is expected? There's a lot of these. I'm trying to read them as they come in.
Okay, that's fine.
Why do you feel this training is needed?
Excellent.
Are we currently having any issues here at the bank? If so, where and how widespread is it?
Good.
Who is the audience? What is sexual harassment? What are some common examples? A couple more iterations of who is your audience, things like that.
Yeah. Some questions that I think often get overlooked is the biggest question is, and some people touched on this, why? not so much the what or the where or the how, but the why. Why do you want us to do this training? And I think a lot of times instructional designers, we're afraid to ask this question because, well, are we kind of undermining ourselves if we say, why are you doing this training? Well, they want to do this training. Well, shouldn't I know why they're doing this training? No, we need to know why they're doing this training. If this is a bank, is it just compliance? Or have they had problems in the past? What if their bank manager was caught with sexual misconduct and they need a whole revamping of their organization? So one of the first questions that I ask is why are you doing this training? The second thing is you can do a cognitive approach or you can do a behaviorist approach. I really like a behaviorist approach because we want to know what behaviors do we want to change or influence. And I'll actually ask this, and I'll actually explain this to the client. Is I don't want this to be a cognitive dumping ground of information. I want this to be something where we're changing behaviors. And I'll actually tell them this, that we're using a behaviorist approach and not just a cognitive approach where we're going to give them some information and then give them some kind of an assessment at the very end. That's kind of one of the issues that we're trying to overcome in college education, is we're trying to get away from this cognitive approach and get into more of a behaviorist approach where we're changing people's behaviors or we're influencing them. So that would be one of the questions that I would also want to ask the subject matter experts or the key stakeholders is, well, what behaviors do you want to change? I mean, we can just assume that, oh, well, it's sexual harassment. We want them to stop, well, what do you mean, what do we want to change? What exactly are they doing right now that they're not doing or that they should be doing? Or what are they doing that's wrong that needs to be changed? And in a sexual harassment course, we could say, well, it's obvious, but we would probably still want to ask the client just so that we know and so that we're catching their vision. Who is the target audience? Well, who are these people in the bank? Are these busy bankers that don't have much time? Or are these people, for example, what if they were doing sexual harassment for a school? What if we're doing sexual harassment for a Fortune 500 company? So we do want to know who the target audience is, fairly specific too. So that would be another question that I would ask is who is the target audience? And I think that was mentioned as well from some of the audience. And then one of the biggest questions that I think we also overlook is what is the look and feel going to be? And that's reciprocal. We need to share with them what we feel the look and feel is going to be and then give them options. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But those are some of the big questions that I ask up front, and then I can kind of start asking more specifics. But I always want to know why we're doing the training. I want to know what behaviors we're going to change, who it is this is targeted for, so that I can target the look and feel and also the vision that I have based on the target audience. And then we need to also find out from them what the look and feel is going to be, which could be done a little bit later on. For us, we have a look and feel session where we have our art department get involved in conjunction with the IDs. And I think that works really well because then we can give them a look and feel as well as an approach. So I think that those are really important. Let me give you an example of what I mean when I say the shared vision of the look and feel. I want to do a quick poll to demonstrate why this is important. Let's say we're going to create rules and procedures training for employees at a national gym or an athletic club. So like Gold's Gym or Vasa Fitness or one of those memberships. These are people that work for them. These are employees that they're going to be doing some rules and procedures training, okay, as to what their roles and responsibilities are at the gym. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of look and feel that we might supply to our clients, and I want you to make a decision as to which one you would use if you were the client. I hope that makes sense. So basically, I'm going to show you 4 different styles of look and feel, and I want you to chime in when I tell you to as to which one you would prefer as far as the look and feel. Would it be number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4? So take a look at this one. This is look and feel number 1. Very visual. We have the green colors. We have a little bit of iconography, limited text on screen. You can see the color palette. We use not as much text, mostly going to be audio driven. So there's number 1. Here's number 2, mostly blues, a little bit of outlines. We have the bubbles, so it's a little bit more rounded. Still use some iconography, a little bit more visualness. That's number 2. And you don't have to worry too much, but just your first impressions as to which one you like the best. Number 3, here we go with illustrations. Still a little bit limited text, a little bit more text on screen, but it's going to be illustrated. Now, keep in mind who our audience is. These are probably 20, 25-year-old people that work for a gym, a fitness center. And the last one, more purplish, a little bit more iconography. Still going to be using some visuals, more boxy shape. If you had to choose 1 through 4, which one would you prefer? Go ahead and I'll give you a minute. And I just want to see, we're not going to count this up, but I just want to, Andrew, is there a lot of differences in opinion, or do they all choose the same one?
There's a variety.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I was going for here, is we can think that we have the best looking design for something, but unless we get the client involved and show them different samples of what we're going for, we're not going to really know what it is they like or don't like. And that was kind of my idea behind this activity, was just to show, because I'm assuming that we've got all kinds of 1s, all kinds of 2s, all kinds of 3s, all kinds of 4s for different reasons. And so whenever we are trying to share our vision, we need to catch their vision of what it is that they like and don't like. And one way to do this, even though it takes a little bit more time, is to share a look and feel. And if you do have an art department, I would highly recommend that you do this. Now, these are just 4 out of, I believe we have 10 to 12 different look and feels that we share with them when we do our kickoff meeting. And we say, which style do you like? And then they will tell us which one they like. And that saves us so much time, because now we know the look and feel of what it is that they like and what they don't like. And so I would highly recommend that if you can do that, and you could even do that yourself if you just want to put together a couple of sample slides saying, well, I'm going to go with a lot of imagery, or I'm going to go with icons, or I'm going to go with limited text on screen. You can share that with the client and get their feedback so that you're catching their vision, and that it does save a lot of time. So that was kind of the idea behind that.
So a quick question has popped up. 10
Yes.
seems like it's a lot.
It is a lot.
Why do you do 10 instead of 3 or 5?
You could do less. We tend to do more just because we've created so many of these already. And the 10 are very different. Some of them are illustrated, but they're a different type of illustration. Some of them just have different fonts. Some of them have different styles of images, and that's why we share the different ones. That's a good question. Why do we have so many? If you wanted to go with 3 or 4, that would be adequate. The clients are usually pretty happy if you give them 3 or 4 options. And I also will do that with my approach. And I'll talk about approach here in just a minute, because we also want to share our approach to the training. So that's part of look and feel, is also the approach that we're going to use. So that's a good question. Like I said, we have different likes, dislikes. Sometimes the client doesn't know what they like or don't like. We're working with the client right now that we're kind of having to hold their hand and lead them through this, because it's their first time doing instructional design. And so we're providing all kinds of options for them. And they decided, well, we want to do this illustrated. Well, what kind of illustration did you want? And so we provided them with 4 or 5 different options of illustrations, because even within the genre of illustrations, you're going to have different looks and feels. And so we provided that for them so that they could say, well, we don't like this, but we do like this. That has saved us so much time, because now when I'm doing my storyboarding, I already have my look and feel determined. I don't have to worry about, well, I sure hope they like this. We know that they're going to be okay with it because they signed off on it. Any other questions about that, about the look and feel?
No, things
We're
are
okay?
well.
Okay, great. Now, let's talk about sharing our vision. We need to share our vision of our approach. There actually is an approach that we need to share with them of, well, how are we going to provide this training? What method are we going to use? to share the information? Or is it going to be a cognitive approach where we just kind of give them information because maybe it's compliance training, maybe the customer or the client doesn't really want anything special, or do we want to share that, hey, we can do this a little bit differently? Okay. Not only the look and feel, but you may do this up front in your kickoff meeting, is, hey, this is the approach that I'm thinking about taking. And let me give you an example of what I mean. And so we share our approach and get buy-in on this kickoff meeting. And here's an example. Let's say we're going to do some business training for employees who work at an auto insurance company. So they sell auto insurance. We're going to explain the roles that different people have in selling car insurance. So they have different people that are going to be doing this training. They have different roles within the company, but they all focus on car insurance. And here's an example of what I mean by our vision for the course, our approach. Now we could say, well, we're going to have a host guide us through this training, which is a very common approach, where we have a narrator. Maybe we see the narrator walks us through the training and answers our questions. Or maybe we look over somebody's shoulder as they're receiving the training and we watch them as they do the training, and that's kind of an approach that we could take. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. I use it in some cases. I'll give that as one option to the client, that, you know, we could have a narrator for this, and we could see the narrator and they could guide us through the course, and it could be friendly. And we could also look over somebody's shoulder because they're doing the training for the first time and we're learning with them. Maybe we're coaching them through and making decisions. So that's a good approach. But let's think of something else for this particular course. It's auto insurance training. I'm going to go ahead and open this up to you, the audience. What are some other ideas besides having somebody up on the screen that you can think of for this particular training? And let's say it's 30 minutes.
Using a scenario.
Okay, scenarios. Telling stories. Okay, that's always a good idea.
Demonstrate customer scenarios and ask for feedback and reactions. Maybe make a mini role-playing game.
Okay.
Kind of thing. Have a lizard walk us through selling insurance.
Clever. You know, that's actually there's a lot to be said for little things like that that are just fun, that are interesting, that are different, that are unique.
Try a twisted approach in which people discover learning using scenarios and branching options.
Okay, branching, scenarios. We can do different scenarios.
Walk through maybe good, better, best approaches. That's a good one.
Yep. Good, better, best. Those are always good. Yeah, make them make decisions. Some of the best training is where we have the participants make decisions, because people like that. People can respond to that. Hey, you're asking me? Oh, well, yeah, this is what I think. And there are different ways to do that. Here is one way this is the way that we did it. We used metaphors and floors in a building. So what we did was, and this was, for this particular training, it was actually a little mini commercial. It was created with using animation. And so we animated this. And it was pretty short. You could still do this for a 30-minute course, but we animated this one because they asked us to. So the idea was they're walking into this building and there are 6 different floors, and each one of the floors represents each one of the particular roles and procedures. And so the different individuals, when you selected a floor, and you can select the floors and you can do this in any order. And then what happened was when they selected a floor, here comes the metaphor. So the first one was strategic alliances. And so we'd use a chessboard, meaning strategy. And we kind of broke the fourth wall when we did this. For those of you who don't know what the fourth wall is, in movies, the fourth wall is where the person kind of breaks out of their character and addresses you as the audience. Quentin Tarantino is pretty famous for breaking the fourth wall. But we actually broke the fourth wall and had them, address the audience kind of in a fun way. But here we're using a metaphor, and we actually tell them, this is a metaphor of what the strategic team does. And so the elevator would open. You can't see the whole screen here because I wanted to include both, but when the elevator opened, it opened and there's these people and they're playing chess. And we describe what the strategic alliances does and how it relates to chess. Then on the next floor, we talked about onboarding, and we talked about how they onboard new employees, and like boarding a ship. And once again, we played with this idea of a metaphor. And then one of the other floors for marketing, that there's always something going on in marketing. And in this one, it was like a state fair, and all the marketers are there and they got their clients there. And so we try to do something a little bit different. And when we shared this vision with the client, they really liked it because it was different. It wasn't just a narrator walking them through something. It was something unique and it was something different. And we went back and forth with them, and we got their input. And so basically it was, hey, here is this particular insurance building, and here are the different floors, and here's what they do. And we used a metaphor for each one. So we shared our vision of this with them, and through making tweaks back and forth, we finally arrived at this particular animated video. And they really liked it. And we did different things like this for the client. We told stories. We used different ways of talking about cars. We told about the life cycle of a car, the lifespan of a particular car in a storyline or in a story format. And so using stories, using those kinds of things. But we always want to share our vision. And in some cases, if you can come up with 2 to 3 different visions, that really helps. So maybe the first one is, well, we could have a narrator. Well, we could use this and tell a story. Or we could do this where we actually use metaphors. And I like the idea of metaphors because people like metaphors because they can be kind of clever, and they can be a lot of fun. Any particular questions about that part, about where we're going to be sharing our vision with the client? And when I say sharing the vision, that includes the look and feel, and it includes our approach. And those are basically the things that I try to share with the client up front after I've looked at their content.
There aren't any questions on this particular section.
Super. The fourth part is to keep the content simple. A good instructor, and this goes for a teacher, this also goes for us as instructional designers, we need to take complicated information and simplify it so that learners can understand it. It's not the other way around. We don't want to make it so difficult that they can't understand it. We want to make it very simple for them. The more simplified we can make it, the better. And sometimes that involves taking information and breaking it up into pieces and chunking it. I think that's a really good, effective way to do it. Minimal text on screen. We don't want a great big long piece of audio on a slide. We want it to be short and simple. And that's kind of what our job is to keep the content simple. An example. Let's say we've been tasked to create a course about the history of electricity in the United States for an electric company. How could we do this and keep it simple for the learner in our approach, but also engaging? So I'm going to open this up to you, the audience. Here's an example. We could use a timeline. We could go through a timeline, have them click on different dates and different things, and that would be kind of, a little bit unique, but is there another way that we could make this more engaging? It's the history of electricity in the United States for an electricity company. Any ideas of an approach that we could take that would make it more engaging than just having a timeline? Now, I'm going to also limit this even more. We could tell a story of the history of electricity, but let's try to avoid that even. What else could we do as our approach for this particular topic?
There's a couple ideas here.
Okay.
One is to make it like a movie or use some sort of video. Another person is to maybe use a time machine kind of mechanic.
I like that.
Fly back.
Yeah.
Label switches on the wall and later content based on or off switches, things like that. Make it a game. Let's see, there was another one that was fun here. Jurassic Park DNA intro style, says another person.
Nice.
Show significant events and then have the user put them in chronological order.
Okay.
Have lightning hit something and it changes the scenario, and now and show how electricity changed through the years.
Okay, I like that.
You could interview historic people, kind of a thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and then lots of other, use
that's the idea.
Use all of
those are great ideas. Yeah, we're thinking a little bit differently now, because the first thing you're going to think of is, well, let's do a timeline. Well, that's okay, but a lot of people, we do timelines a lot. Is there another approach that we could use for this particular training? And we actually did this for a company, and this is what we came up with: the History of Electricity Museum. We created an interactive museum in which they got to go from room to room, and they got to learn more about it. We even created a map. This is the map of the museum, like you would receive, when you go into the museum. And so we have these different rooms: the early history of electricity, word origins for electricity. Where did watt come from? Where did amp come from? Benjamin Franklin, he was, he's pretty famous with electricity. We had a room dedicated to him. We had a room dedicated to Edison and Tesla, and we actually had them fighting in their room, the big duel between them. Evolution of electricity, there was a room for that. There was a small film about knob and tube wiring, which was pretty popular in the 1950s, and why that was dangerous and why it was outdated. Advances in the generation of electricity and the future of electricity. So we created an interactive museum in which they got to go around from room to room. We even had the restrooms and the cafeteria and the store and the lobby have little tiny hints and little bits of information about the history of electricity. And so it was more of a discovery kind of training where they could go from room to room and learn more about electricity. And so that's the approach that we took, which we thought, well, that might be kind of fun for them to be able to do these different concepts within a museum. So here's an example of the Edison and Tesla. This was the museum room, and this was just the storyboard part. The finished was a lot more, it looks a lot better, the finished version. I just showed you the storyboard phase. But here you can select Edison and Tesla within this room, and they talk about kind of their fight, to be the dominant particular kind of electricity that was going to be used. Was it going to be AC or DC for the electricity that was used? And their different inventions and their victories and their losses and things like that. So that was how we approached it. So to kind of summarize, so we're kind of short. I guess I don't know, how long did this take? 30 minutes? I guess it was shorter than I thought it would be, but just to summarize everything, we talked about why do we storyboard. We talked about why you want to catch the vision first from the client. And then you need to share your vision, and as part of that vision is your approach and the look and feel. And then you want to simplify all of the different things that you're going to be doing in the course. And that sometimes does take time, but that's part of our job. I think the last thing that I would say is, as instructional designers, we also need to let the client know that we're really invested into their particular training, and that we are the experts. A lot of times we might hesitate to share our thoughts or to even push back, because sometimes the client will say, oh, I don't really know about this or this or this. We need to give them our opinions as well as instructional designers, because that's what they're paying us for. And we need to let them know that this is our expert opinion on this particular training, that this is going to work and this isn't. I've just learned from experience in the 10 to 15 years that I've been doing this, that every time I hold back and don't really tell them, hey, I really strongly would recommend that we go this route because of this and this and this, and share my vision with them. Whenever I've held back, it's always kind of come back to haunt us, because it's like, oh, well, yeah, if I would have told him that, we could have avoided some problems. And so my goal is always to share my thoughts, depending on what it is that they're asking for or their feedback. And that, especially when I try to simplify things, take their content and share it. You can never communicate too much with the client as an instructional designer, is what I've learned. The more that you communicate with them, the more they appreciate you and they value your opinions. And so that is kind of the whole I guess, kind of if you want one thing to take away from this, is you need to catch their vision and share your vision with them by communicating. Any final questions?
Yes, we've got several questions coming in here.
Okay.
And a couple that we held on to the end because they're a little bit more general.
Okay.
For your storyboards, do you use still images and screenshots in PowerPoint or G Slides or some other presenter like that? Or what is your vehicle for delivery?
We used to use PowerPoint, and I think that's a fine method of delivery for a storyboard. And what we do is we include the imagery on that, and then in the notes section of the PowerPoint, we will include the narration for the learners, for the clients, so they can see what our audio will be. And then we include in little yellow squares the cues. So if we're going to have things appear on screen or disappear from the screen as part of animation, we use little cues, and then we put those cues into the narration as part of the notes section so that they can actually see, oh, okay, this is going to appear on the screen little by little, and that saves us time. Now we actually storyboard in Storyline for most of our clients so that we can provide the computer-generated audio for them, but we don't go any further than that. We don't actually create the interactivity, and we tell the client this, that there's not going to be interactivity on this. We're still going to use cues, but you will be able to see and hear the narration. That saves us a lot of time because then we can pass it off to the developers and then they can create the interactivity. So as instructional designers, we just needed to make sure that we kept it simple, and we just go screen by screen using cues. And the nice thing about using that we found is then the client, for their feedback, they can just enter the feedback in the tool itself in Storyline 360. And that way it's an easy way to do that. If you're going to be storyboarding directly into PowerPoint, then you're going to want to have some kind of a system in which they can provide feedback. We used to do that in Google Docs, where they would just type in their feedback and indicate which slide it was, which I think is also fine. We just found that the clients appreciated it when they could do it directly into Storyline. Then they could hear the audio as well, which I do like. We just need to make sure that the clients know that they're not going to see any interactivity.
There's several questions along those same lines. How in depth do we want the storyboards to be? Are you actually putting in the graphics that you're going to use? Are you putting in reference?
Yeah, I would recommend. I would strongly recommend that you put in placeholder graphics. We just go to our stock graphic art, and we won't purchase them, but you grab this, a screenshot, a thumbnail of it. But yes, I would recommend that you make it as close to final as possible, because they're going to need to see what it is we're envisioning. Some people just use rough outlines. I've even heard of some clients that use just Word documents and describe what they're going to do. It's hard for them to catch our vision if they can't see it. And so I would strongly recommend that when you're doing your storyboarding, go ahead and put in that final image the way you envision it happening. And then what your developers are going to do is they're going to take that, they're going to make some small tweaks to it. Maybe instead of a square, maybe they'll round the edges or something like that. That's kind of what your graphics people will do. But whenever we delivered our storyboards, it was pretty close to being final. The things that they would tweak, our developers would be like the buttons. Maybe they would make them a little bit more shaded or something like that, add different things that we've talked to them about. But the nice thing about having a look and feel already decided upon is that I can take that look and feel and I can just insert my content. So if we already know that we're going to be doing scenarios, because we already did that when we talked about our approach on our kickoff meeting, we said, I really think that this would be a good scenario style storyboard and course. Well, then they know that. Then we go ahead and we create a sample image of what that scenario is going to look like with the imagery, maybe the iconography, different things like that. They sign off on that. Well, now my storyboard has gotten that much easier because now I already know what the look and feel is going to be. I know it's going to be scenario based. I know that they've already signed off on it. And all I have to do is now go out and find my images and put them in and then be able to create the particular scenarios or the story that goes along with it. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that you try to make it as close to the final as possible, just so that they catch what our vision is.
Is there a danger, or do you ever run into a spot where your clients get hung up on the images or graphics and then they get distracted by that and stop focusing on the content?
Yes, that is a challenge. Sometimes they will get focused on the wrong things. Usually what we'll do is we'll tell them, if you don't like an image, please let us know what you'd like in place of that image. Usually it's just a question of, oh, instead of this particular individual, we'd like a different individual. Instead of a man, we'd like a woman. Or instead of an older woman, we'd like a younger woman. It's generally, it's specific enough that when they give us the feedback that we can say, okay, we're just going to swap this out with another image. And I'd say probably 25% of all of our storyboards, we end up swapping out imagery. So don't purchase the images first. If you do that way, that's the way we do it, is our developers will actually purchase the images. We just put in the watermarked versions of the images in place. But yeah, I will scale them to the correct scale. I'll put them where I want them. I expect that more or less the developers will keep it similar to what I've created, but then they just make a few tweaks because they do have a background in art. Whereas my background is in instructional design and in education, not so much in graphics.
So it sounds like a lot of this is kind of built ground up. Do you use a storyboarding template at all, or is it always from scratch?
It depends on the client, but usually we will create, we'll send them the samples, and then we will custom make this for each client. We usually do custom make these. We'll recycle things every once in a while, but if it's a new client, then we typically will build it from the ground up. That's just us. If you use templates, there is nothing wrong with that, but you're going to want to share those templates with your client because they're going to want to see what your vision is. And if your vision is kind of constrained by templates, they're going to need to know that so they can sign off on it.
So the storyboard that you've created here, you're using it for kickoff, but it's not the complete storyboard. Is this just one storyboard that you start at kickoff and it just grows and develops?
Well, what we do for the kickoff is we'll go over their content initially. We won't actually create a storyboard to share with them at kickoff. We'll just share this look and feel because the look and feel already exists. We've created enough of them that we've just grabbed some of those and we've created a style guide, look and feel for them to choose. So that's how we do it. And then I will just share my approach. I don't share any more than that. At the kickoff meeting because that would be a lot of work up front. If we actually created the storyboard to share with them during the kickoff meeting, there'd be a lot of tweaks to it. So what I do is I just share my general approach. In this case, I'd say, well, I think we should tell a story about this car from birth to death, and we can animate it and do it this way and this way and this way. How do you feel about this? Then when they give me their approval, then we'll go ahead and create the storyboard, send it off to them. They give us little tweaks to make. We usually give them only 1 or 2 rounds of edits that they can make on a storyboard. Then we send them the final version, which has been developed by our developers. And we usually give them 1 more round of edits. Because if you let the client make tons and tons of edits, they'll never. We've actually had that before with clients where we said, well, we'll give them a little bit of latitude. And that it can go into 5 or 6 or 7 rounds of edits if you let them, because they're always going to find something. And so if you establish up front, we can give you 1 to 2 rounds of edits, then we're finalizing our storyboard, and then we're finalizing the developed version. That's how we do it.
Excellent. We won't take any more questions today. I think you've got one more slide for me.
Yes, I do.
So all of the experience that has been mentioned today and all of our processes is a part of what our custom development team does when they're building custom courses for different companies around the world. And if you would like to get more of an idea of the kind of things we do, or if you're just looking for some tips or tricks, you can schedule a jam session today. Visit eLearningBrothers.com and there's a custom solutions section there that you can fill out, and we'll reach out to you and chat with you there. Thank you so much, Dr. Christiansen, and thanks everybody for joining us. We hope you guys have a great day, and that we'll see you in a webinar next year.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.